What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host who does the most, Ethan Smith. I hope you all are having a phenomenal Thursday, as am I. I know this episode is coming out a little late today, but I know that you all are excited for it, as I will be talking about the MiLB Rule 5 draft from yesterday, where the Pirates added 3 players from 3 different farm systems and lost 2 players to 2 different teams as well. We're also going to be talking about Don Kelly withdrawing from some managerial hires as well, which is always a nice thing to talk about in terms of keeping him here in Pittsburgh as a bench coach. But I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, who does the most here at the Locked On Pirates podcast. Thank you so much, as always, for making me your first listen of the day every single day. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Locked On Pirates or at MVP_Ethan. You guys know what to do. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, and of course, come see my beautiful face on YouTube. And as you already know, when the music hits, it's time to go. So guess what, guys? Let's have a fun Thursday.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And of course, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, who does the most, and welcome back to the best Pirates podcast on the planet, if you want to say that. But welcome back. Hope you all are enjoying everything going on in the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're listening to this, it is 4:48 Eastern Time on Thursday, December 9th. Hope you all are having a wonderful Thursday. The Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, play tonight, so check out Christopher Carter over at Locked On Steelers for all of your Pittsburgh Steelers needs. But we are a Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, and on today's episode, as I mentioned in the intro, we are going to be talking about some things in the MiLB Rule 5 draft. Of course, particularly pertaining to the Pirates, where they did acquire pitcher Zach Matson, pitcher Nick Leo, and infielder Jack Gonzalez in the MiLB Rule 5 draft. Steven Jennings and Jonah Davis are out. So those were the things for the Pirates, of course. And it was an interesting draft all around, by the way. Of course, if many of you don't know, the CBA does not prohibit the MiLB draft happening. It can prohibit the Rule 5 draft, I believe, happening, but the CBA, of course, does not prohibit that right now. So things are on the come up with this. We're going to talk about Jacob Gonzalez, Nick Leo, and Zach Matson a little bit more in the next segment, but I did want to start about with just how the Rule 5 draft really went. And, I mean, you've seen some names across go, but one of the biggest ones in the Pirates, of course, with the number 2 selection was Zach Matson there. Nolan Hoffman, who many expected to be the number 1 pick, was the number 1 pick by the Baltimore Orioles from the Mariners system. You had some other interesting names as well. Gabriel Rodriguez goes to the Rockies from the Braves. And then again, you saw Steven Jennings go to the New York Yankees from the Pittsburgh Pirates. John Nogowski, by the way, Pittsburgh Pirates legend, was selected by the Atlanta Braves from the the San Francisco Giants system, so that was also nice to see. And you see Moises Castillo, another guy that was selected, and then there were still some interesting guys too. Round 2, of course, was kind of a consolation round. Nick Kuzia was also selected. Nick Leo was selected in the second round by the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, Jacob Gonzalez selected in the third round, and the final round of the Rule 5 MiLB draft was the final round draft pick was Carlos Santiago by the Marlins from the Dodgers system. So across history with this MiLB draft, I mean, you do see some players pan out, like Nolan Hoffman, I think, has a real chance to do very well in Baltimore. I think he's a phenomenal pitcher. I think he has a chance to do great things. But, of course, since all major league transactions are on hold as of right now, only minor league players that could be put in the minor leagues at any level of the system in 2022 were available. And, of course, you see there was just a lot of guys that were taken. There were some interesting guys. Carson Fulmer, who was a number 8 overall pick in 2015, was taken by the Dodgers from the Reds. John Duplanter, who was also selected by the Dodgers from the Giants, is another interesting one. There was only one current member of there was one current member of a top 30 list taken, and that was right-hander Curtis Taylor, who was the number 29 ranked Blue Jays prospect, who was taken by the Nationals. So, again, there's a lot to talk about in terms of this stuff. I mean, Zach Matson, Nick Leo, and Jack Gonzalez I'll get into again, as I said, in the next segment. A lot of times these guys really end up just being minor league depth that the team needs. Of course, picking up 2 pitchers in this draft, you can never go wrong with that. Maybe Matson and Leo do very well here in Pittsburgh. We'll have to see and wait. But there's a real chance that most of the time these guys just usually fizzle out. And you never really know where it's going to head, just because it kind of depends on their own development. It kind of depends on what level of the system they're placed in right when they get here. It depends on a lot of different factors. And, of course, the Rule 5 draft is going to be much more important for the Pirates, of course, not protecting some major players in that spot, like a Cal Mitchell, who was not protected. You have a lot of guys there that could be taken, I think, but I still think they did pretty well in terms of picking in the Rule 5 draft in here. And leaving that alone now, we're going to go ahead and get into our sponsors today. Of course, our first sponsor is very familiar to all of you and should be familiar if you want to use it tonight to bet on the Pittsburgh Steelers to beat the Minnesota Vikings, and it is BetOnline.ag. BetOnline has you covered for all season for more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON excuse me, to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games like blackjack and poker. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, as you see here on the bottom on YouTube, and if you go there, is where the game starts. Now to one of my favorite apparel companies in the entire world. A company I wore all throughout high school, a new sponsor of the podcast, is Stance Apparel. Stance, of course, founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. With a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity, Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside some of pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. What are your favorite designs? Well, they go from Wu-Tang Clan, Batman, The Goonies, Star Wars, The Office, Harry Potter, Disney, Marvel, Bob Marley. Major League Baseball players even wear Stance socks, the National Basketball Association, and Pixar. Of course, I'm a big Star Wars guy. You can't see my whole Star Wars set here, but of course, I did move Baby Yoda also. But I do have some Stance socks from Star Wars that are very awesome. Of course, Stance socks feel comfortable and soft all the time. About what do I really like about them the most, honestly, is they just fit very well on your feet. They really do. They're very phenomenal. They really work well, and they last a long time. And I mean, even a lot of my friends in high school wore Stance, and that's really what got me into it. And then I was pretty much addicted to it for years on end. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in. That those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase, and use promo code LOCKEDON in all caps at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Guys, you do not understand how excited I am to have Stance as a sponsor of this podcast. Send me free socks, please. Please. Actually send me free socks. It would be very phenomenal if you did so. But as promised here in the second segment, we're going to get a little bit into the guys that the Pirates brought in from the Rule 5 MiLB draft last night. Of course, as mentioned before, they were pitcher Zach Matson, pitcher Nick Leo, and infielder Jacob Gonzalez. I'm going to start with infielder Jacob Gonzalez. He was picked up from the Giants Of course, as you see here, if you're on YouTube, he is an infielder, but does have experience playing both corner infield spots. So he's primarily a third baseman and a first baseman, but he also has played some left field as well. And I have seen him play in person in Augusta because he was playing with the High A Augusta Green Jackets this past year. But his biggest thing, the positional flexibility is there. It really is helpful, but the biggest thing that he does struggle with, apparently, in High A last year was hitting the baseball. He hit 174 last year, which just was not very good at all. Over his career, though, he's a 251 career guy. He hit 253 on average, with everything combined in 2021, before he got a career 695 OPS. I mean, the only other thing that's very concerning about him is he doesn't hit ball particularly well as of yet. Maybe that's something that he'll pick up here in the Pirates farm system. But usually when you have a guy like this that doesn't hit the ball too well, you're really looking to have some positional flexibility, which he does have. So he is a very solid defensive player from what I have seen and what I have heard. But he doesn't possess any real speed on the base pass or in the field. So I think even the thought of putting him in left field is probably out of the question. I think he's much more of a third baseman or a first baseman. In the Pirate system, I would really try him at first base just because of the lack of depth now with Colin Morangon. Really, you only have Mason Martin and a couple other guys, and then, of course, you have Tutugo at the MLB level. So I would just really be hesitant on putting him anywhere but first base because of the fact of no real speed. And let's see that average come up, bud. 174 is not going to cut it. If he continues to do that at the High A level, he's never going to get anywhere. And, of course, he was the latest pick of the Pirates in this draft. So we'll see what he pans out to be. I'm not really entirely sure of his measure. Well, I believe he's 6'3", but I'm not really entirely sure of everything else that comes with Jacob Gonzalez. I am sure if I do a little bit more research, I can give you guys a better answer on Twitter. Pitcher Nick Leo is next. He was the second round pick by the Pittsburgh Pirates here in the Rule 5 MiLB draft. He came over from the Texas Rangers. Shout out to Bryce Patrick of the Locked On Rangers podcast, who we've had on here multiple times. He's a very fun guy. Enjoy his company all the time. And you'll see with Zach Matson and Nick Leo, we'll talk about this at length a little bit, is both of them very high ERAs and very high OPSs allowed last year at different levels. Zach Matson at Double-A, Nick Leo, who we're talking about now, at High A. But very high ERAs and very high OPS numbers that were just very concerning. But the one thing, guys, that I love, the one thing I love so much, good strikeout rate. Nick Leo had a very good strikeout rate last year. He was a very good pitcher in terms of that. He just has to limit the contact. That's really the biggest thing I think you're going to see with him, is he just really needs to limit the contact that he gives up. Of course, he is a former 20th round pick from the Texas Rangers, a career 4.68 ERA over 102 innings pitched with a 1.3 whip, 137 career strikeouts, which I like to see. And of those strikeouts, by the way, he only has 26 walks, so we love to see that. I think he has a real shot to be a good command pitcher. We just have to see if he can really put his stuff together and make himself a much more solid pitcher and not giving up 5 earned runs a game, on top of just limiting contact. But I also think, just depending on what team he ends up playing on, which I think he will stay in Greensboro for the time being, I think he has a real shot to bring that ERA down, keep the strikeout rate up, which again, you guys know I love strikeout rate. And, he hasn't really played very much in terms of this. He only played in 2019 and this past year. Of course, at regular A, he looked a lot better. 2.73 ERA, 3-2 record over 26 1/3 innings pitched. 39 of his 40 strikeouts, or 39 of his 79 strikeouts came at single A. And you can't really be too mad about it. 235 average, 1.1 whip. That's good numbers. You like to see that. But then when he made the jump to High A, 0-1 record, 7.80 ERA in 1 start and 14 games, 30 innings pitched, 34 hits, 9 home runs, which was very concerning. He allowed 14 home runs, which, again, that's just a concerning number to me. And 10 walks. to 40 strikeouts and a 276 average. So what you want to really see from Nick Leo here is just an emphasis on, as I mentioned before, just limiting contact, keeping his strikeout rate high, and seeing what he can do. And then we get into Zach Matson, who was the number 2 overall player in this Rule 5 draft. Zach Matson, of course, a Rockies product and a former Baltimore Orioles pickup. Zach Matson, I think he has a lot more potential here. I think he has the most potential of all 3 of these guys. Of course, considering the fact that he was born in 1995, he's only 26, so he has time to grow. In 2021, he had a 5.73 ERA over 35 games and 33 innings pitched, 57 strikeouts to a 1.30 whip. But again, 57 strikeouts to only 15 walks, which, as you see on the bottom of the screen here on YouTube, a 15.55 K per 9 rate in AA, which I really like to see. AA, not the easiest place to play, and that is where he played all year. And you look at where he was before 2017, 4.13 ERA, 26 strikeouts to 10 walks, and his strikeout numbers have went up every single year except this past year. I do think he did deal with some injuries, and I like looking at his 2019 stats. His 2019 stats, when he was in full A, he was 4-0, 2.55 ERA, and 35 1/3 innings pitched with a 168 average and a 1.13 whip. He moved up to advanced A, 5.01 ERA, so he really struggled there. 32 1/3 innings pitched with a 236 average. But, I mean, he's only a 220 average guy. So, I mean, Zach Matson, I think he has a lot of potential, again, as I said with Nick Leo, to be a very good command pitcher. He just has to limit the contact, and that's one thing that a lot of scouts have been saying that I've read about both of these pitchers is very solid pickups in terms of the strikeout rate, but they have to limit the contact. They cannot give up a career-worst 786 OPS like he did in 2021, and these are things that can be fixable. Being 26, he is already a little bit up there in age. That is a little bit concerning for me. It's kind of concerning in the idea that he is like that. But we'll see what Zach Matson can turn into. We'll see what a lot of these guys can turn into. Again, we could be talking 4 or 5 months from now or even a year from now, and Zach Matson could be in the starting rotation or in the bullpen. I think I would like to see both of these guys end up being bullpen arms. I do think they're naturally around that area anyway, because if you notice, Zach Matson has not started a game in his entire minor league career, so he is much more of a relief pitcher. So I think that Zach Matson, keep a close eye on him in 2021, depending on what level of the system they decide to put him in. He could be an addition to this bullpen, and we talked about improving the bullpen last week, or actually not last week, a couple days ago, sorry. But we did talk about that, so keep a close eye on that and see what can possibly be done with Zach Matson to maybe make this bullpen a little bit better, and I would be all for it. I think it would be very fun for him to get that done. And before we get into our final break of today's episode, I want to thank you all for making me your first listen of the day every single day. And let's hear a word from some of our sponsors. And welcome back, of course, to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, who does the most. I hope you all are having a phenomenal Thursday, as I am. Everything is going wonderful over here, still in the lockout stage of things, and there are some things going on still. That's why we're making a podcast every day. Of course, I did miss yesterday. I do apologize about that, but I am trying to make sure that these are getting out really quickly. Of course, in a couple weeks, we will be moving to Monday, Wednesday, Friday format. Don't forget that Wednesdays are going to be your opportunity to be on this podcast. Just message me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. We will set up a time for you to be on the podcast so you can talk about whatever you want. We could talk about Bob Nutting. We could talk about Pirates history. We could talk about Brian Reynolds, Key Brian Hayes, Dave Bednar. We could talk about Derek Shelton. We could talk about Gregory Polanco if you want to. We could talk about Andrew McCutcheon. We could talk about whatever you guys want, and that is exactly why I want you to be on the podcast here pretty soon. But to end off today's podcast, we're going to talk about Don Kelly withdrawing from some interviews for managerial jobs. Of course, Don Kelly is the current bench coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates right now. He was getting some looks at managerial hires as of late, and he was apparently going to be a guy that the Mets were looking into. Excuse me. But he did withdraw from that. And Joe Espada, Buck Showalter, Matt Quattaro, and Brad Ausmus were considered possibilities. Of course, for those of you that don't know, Don Kelly has been here since 2019. Since leaving the Astros as a first base coach in 2019. And Don Kelly, by the way, man, he's going to get a job eventually. Maybe if Derek Shelton doesn't end up panning out, maybe Don Kelly ends up being the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Not saying that's going to happen. Okay? We're not saying it's going to happen, but it's a possibility, right? But he's going to have a managerial job at some point in his career. He's very young. He's only 41 years old. He used to play baseball. He knows what he's talking about. He's a very solid coach. From what I've heard about from most Pirates players in interviews, they really like Don Kelly. It would have been a shame to see him go. But he's still here. He's going to be alongside Derek Shelton. And going into next year, I do want to see a little bit of coaching improvement just everywhere. Me and Gary talked a couple weeks ago about Oscar Marin and the onus that has to be put on him with improving some pitchers this year. And Derek Shelton, too, he needs to improve some of his tactics and games, some of his strategies, some of the decisions he makes. Don Kelly as well is a big part of that. First base coach, third base coach, just every spot of coaching I think needs to be very on spot this year, or else you could really start hearing some Derek Shelton and Oscar Marin firing rumors, which is where I think Don Kelly could come in and really make a solid addition to the Pirates' managerial history. But I'm not saying that's going to happen. And I just wanted to bring that up briefly. Wanted to keep today's episode a little bit shorter than usual. Thank you all so much for listening today. Hope you all have had a phenomenal Thursday. Sorry about the late episode time. I will be getting tomorrow's episode out with Mr. Adam Bittner early tomorrow. Adam, of course, part of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We will be talking probably a little bit about the Steeler game at the beginning of the podcast. But then, of course, any other topics that are fiery in the Pittsburgh Pirates world and the baseball world, as we are still in the middle of the Locked Out. So this is the Locked Out Pirates podcast if you want to do that. But thank you all for making me your hashtag first listen of the day every single day. Listen every day where you can find your podcast, and follow this podcast at Locked On Pirates on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, Odyssey, and of course YouTube. You can follow this podcast as well on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan. Guys, thank you so much for listening today, even though it was a little bit late. I really appreciate it so much. Hope you all have a phenomenal Thursday. I will see you tomorrow. And until then, guys, I will see you on the flip side. Go Steelers. Let's have some fun, baby.